Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you calling up my bill, the SAVE Act, which I have worked on since the pandemic. The concept of this bill was originated back in February and March of 2020 when we found that the United States was victimized by this global pandemic, and we were wholly unprepared for it. Unprepared for it. I'm reminded of Warren Buffett's famous expression about making investment decisions. You know how well prepared you are if it's low tide. We see who doesn't have a bathing suit on. And absolutely, we were caught at low tide in the spring of 2020 with no bathing suit as it related to our planning for medical supplies, access to pharmaceuticals, pharmaceutical agreement, protective equipment for our medical agents and for medical devices. And this bill, which I worked on with my friend, Mr. Vargas of California, corrects that by directing the President of the United States to have a strategy for these critical, essential elements related to pharmaceuticals, pharmaceutical agreements, the idea of PPE, which we came to learn that acronym during the pandemic, medical devices. It allows, that strategy is the key component, it's the key change to the Defense Production Act, and it will, in my view, bolster those supply chains that were not in existence in the right way. Secondly, that strategic plan in this bill will be submitted to the congressional leadership for their review. And then the President is obligated to issue reports on a regular basis to the congressional leadership as to how he or she is implementing this plan. And then finally, any payments made to commence those sorts of supply chain enhancements in the case of an emergency, national emergency, would be submitted to Congress 30 days in advance and certified before the payment is made. While the Trump administration's application of the Defense Production Act was welcomed during the pandemic, there was no strategy. There was no outline of what was targeted and what was needed by the Department of Human Services, the Defense Department, all in the nature of helping our nation cope with this national emergency. And I would remind my colleagues that in 1994, the Defense Production Act was amended to specifically add national emergencies that would put the defense of the U.S. at risk by disrupting supply chains, and that is also natural disasters were amended in 1994 to make sure that we could have a strategic plan. So as I say, this plan we're requesting the President to produce would diversify our medical supply chains away from China. You've got 80% of some pharmaceutical ingredients we're dependent on with China. And that's why the Defense Production Act already has semiconductors, rare earths, strategic minerals already in the act as a strategically important to the national defense because of that same supply chain dependency on China. In my home state of Arkansas during the pandemic, we were faced with a horrendous ventilator shortage. And while I was delighted that Arkansas entrepreneurs and the University of Arkansas Medical System came up with their own ventilator design and produced them, that's not the kind of lack of preparation that I believe our country deserved in the face of the pandemic. And the SAVE Act takes those actions and makes sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of 2020 again in the future if we're confronted with a public health crisis. So in summary, this bill, which you, I hope, will support, will give us a strategic plan. We'll list those essential elements in that plan that will make for a more resilient, diversified supply chain, both here in the United States and in countries friendly to the United States, to make sure that we have the medical devices and medical supplies we need to comprehensively cope with a pandemic. I thank the chairman for scheduling this bill and this markup. I look forward to the discussion. I yield back the balance of my time.